What's going on, brother? Today, I'm going to talk about toxic relationships, why they are so damn hard to get out of, and also how to avoid them. Welcome to my channel. My name is Gino, and today we're going to talk all about toxic relationships. But first, I want to tell you a story about how I found out I was dating a stripper. And the key word there is found out. You heard that correct, because I didn't know going into the relationship that this was going to be the case, but I ended up finding out much later. Now, when I was younger, I grew up in a trailer park about 30 minutes north of Detroit. And inside this trailer, there was 8 people living inside of it. It was very crowded. The walls were stained with cigarette smoke. There was like holes inside the drywall. You know, the toilets were fucking rotting through the ground, and there was rats inside the house. Like, it was not a conducive environment for a kid to grow up in, much less to bring a woman into. So naturally, I was very insecure around women, because what type of woman would want to be with somebody who lives in a situation like that, right? I couldn't bring one home there. She'd run for the hills. So it made me very insecure with women, and it made it very difficult for me to open myself up and talk to them. However, this was when MySpace started coming out. Okay, and MySpace, if you're not familiar, if you're a Gen Zer, if you're somebody who never experienced MySpace, it was a social platform before Facebook. And this was like you put a little profile picture on there, you have a little song, and when people go on your page, and then people would like comment on your little timeline or your little page there, and people could like your pictures and stuff like that. So this was around the time where I started working out, about like a year in, and I started gaining some confidence. So I was I put on some like cut off shirts, and I would take some pictures, and I'd post them up online for hopefully the ladies to look at. And so this was back in the MySpace days, and I had a friend at the time too. My friend at the time was actually the only person who knew where I lived. He lived in a much bigger house in a nice community, but he didn't judge me for who I was. He came and he would come over, he'd hang out with me, and we formed a really close relationship. And we made it a competition between the two of us to see how many girls could comment and like on our pictures, right? So we try to take all the sexy pictures, in the mirror and stuff like that. When you're 16, you're like, fuck yeah, I got it, right? So anyway, we took all these pictures and we post them up online. And we would just see like who could get the most comments on it. And there was this girl that was flirting with both me and my friend, which was the first red flag. Unfortunately, one I wish I would have noticed sooner. Okay, which was the first red flag. So I started talking to this girl, and we ended up meeting up at the mall because we were like 16 at the time, and she had a car, she could drive, but not me. I was fucking living in a trailer park, and nobody was paying for my driver's education, if you know what I'm saying. So anyway, I had met her up at the mall, and things escalated very quickly. She was very forward, which was, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a red flag, but given the situation that was taking place, she was very friendly from the start. Sitting on my lap within 30 minutes, having some real close conversations, and then eventually we just started dating at the end of the day. We just had a little conversation, like, oh, maybe we should just be, boyfriend, girlfriend. So that's how that ended up turning out. So we started dating. Started dating this girl that was flirting with both me and my friend when I first met her. So anyway, she actually helped me get my license. So this was interesting. Since she had her own car, she would like let me take her car sometimes. I ended up getting my permit a little bit into dating her because I'm like, man, she's got a car, maybe I can use it. And she let me take it by herself, right? Like she'd stay home at my disgusting trailer park. I don't know why she'd want to stay there, but she let me take the car. I'd go pick up my friends, go to the store, and I didn't have a license, just had a permit at the time, but I was whizzing around town. It made me feel a sense of independence. It made me feel good. And she ended up allowing me to use her vehicle to actually get my driver's license. So there was a lot of connection happening with this woman at a very, very early time in our relationship. She was helping me experience freedom. She was helping me experience love. It was definitely a unique experience for me. There was something very unique about her situation, however, was the fact that her mother and father, or she never knew who her father was. Her mother died when she was 9 years old of alcoholism. And actually her mom lived in an AA facility, which is an Alcoholics Anonymous facility. Like they would actually like harbor her there because she was such a severe alcoholic, they couldn't trust her to live alone. So this was her mom. She barely knew her as a kid. It was just some nice lady she's seen sometimes, and eventually she died. So this girl that I was dating at the time, she grew up in a house with 2 grandparents. When she was around the age of like 16, they were around like 80 years old almost. So they were extremely religious, never drank, never smoked in their life. So you can imagine what her life must have been like. Not having a father, not really knowing your mother, and growing up around 2 people that could never understand you because they were so outside of your like age and generation that you just don't see eye to eye on anything. So I'm sure it gave her a very, very strange life to grow up in. But the reason why I tell you that is because when she met my family, we grew another attachment because she didn't experience what it was like to have a mother and father. So although my mother and father weren't like the most ideal candidates to be parents, I mean, I would say that they did provide her with a sense of family. So there was another deep and meaningful connection that was taking place and transpiring that made the relationship that much more complex. So fast forward a little bit, I get my license after 16, and then I hit the age of about 18. And I come home one day and all my shit's sitting outside in garbage bags. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? My dad decided it was a point in time where I needed to be on my own. So he kicked me out. He threw all my shit outside. I came home like, well, I got to start life over. I don't know what's going on. Luckily, I was dating that girl at the time and she had a car. So she ended up helping me take all my stuff over to my grandma's house. And that's where I lived for the next 6 months to a year. I was living at my grandma's house. When I was living at my grandma's house, this was the time that Facebook started to become a thing. Facebook started emerging, taking over the social media space, pushing MySpace out of the picture. And it was totally foreign to me. At first, I was very resistant to getting on Facebook because I don't really like adopting new things sometimes, especially when I get used to stuff. But yeah, Facebook was coming out. It was new. I got on it. And I added the girl that I was dating on Facebook as a friend. We started I started scoping out her profile, and I found out that there's these things in your bio. It tells you little characteristics about people, like where they grew up, where they live, where they went to high school. And then it was this weird little area that said who they were in a relationship with. And when I looked at her profile, it said she was in a relationship, but it wasn't with me, it was with somebody else. That was another red flag. She was in a relationship with another guy. I thought, what the fuck is going on? I was so confused. And it was such a strange point in my life, too, because I just got kicked out of my parents' house. I'm living in my grandma's house. I'm trying to navigate life. Everybody went off to college. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And this girl that I loved and basically who was pretty much a large part of my life, seemed like she was deceiving me. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And what I found to be interesting, too, is a week before I found that out, she bought this puppy, this pit bull puppy. She told me, oh, this is for my brother. I'm like, okay, it's for your brother. And then come to find out that it's actually the dog that she bought this guy that she was dating. It was all over his Facebook at the time. So it was a very, very strange situation. So we ended up breaking up for a few months and eventually got back together, which I don't recommend. Okay, that was a very dumb decision on my part. So some more time passed. Again, like I said, I was 18, living at my grandma's house. We got back together. Around the age of 19, we moved in together. We got an apartment. Okay, and this is where things started to transpire in a much different light. Because now we're taking on responsibilities too, as well. We weren't just living at our grandparents' houses, because I was at my grandma's house and she was at her grandma's house, right? We were taking on more responsibilities in terms of financial burden. So I was working a job at the time, but I couldn't afford all the bills by myself. So naturally, she had to get a job. And she ended up getting this job as a hostess, right? And I think, okay, a hostess, that ain't that bad. But then I found out it was in some dude's backyard private bar. And I'm like, wait a second, that sounds kind of strange, Some dude's backyard private bar? And I'm like, all right, whatever. It was paying her good money. She was making really good tip money. And it was something that was, she just had to work during nights. And I thought, awesome, I'm an introvert. She's working nights. I get to play video games. So I'm like, fuck it, I just ignored it for the longest time. I never really thought too much of it because I was at home fucking killing people, playing some video games, She was out there doing whatever the hell she was doing. So some time passed, and I started to hear rumors from people that we knew mutually that she was giving blowjobs and lap dances for extra money. See, I literally just stuttered on that because even thinking back to that, it fucking blew my mind to pieces. Because I'm like, what the fuck is this? Somebody's telling me these rumors that she's having lap dances and giving blowjobs for extra money. I was like, holy shit. This can't be real. It's I literally thought, I'm like, this is a fucking nightmare. There's no way this is true, right? There's no fucking way. I mean, I've been with this girl for about, 3 years now. I'm like, there's no fucking way she could be cheating on me like this. I understand when she was dating somebody else. Maybe that was just a mistake when she was younger, but this is too much. So I'm like, they're just rumors. Fuck it, right? Until I had a friend show me a picture of her topless in a hot tub with another girl at one of these parties, one of these backyard private bar parties. And I'm like, oh my God. My reality started to crumble there because I started to realize all of the old red flags and signs this girl showed me in the past. And I'm like, man, this can't be happening right now. I feel like I was feeling a sense of betrayal start to brew inside of my belly. I started to feel that anxiousness. I started to feel like my stomach was dropping, like my heart was turning cold. It did not make me feel too good. And I could no longer deny what was happening though. It was very obvious that people were providing me with multiple pieces of evidence, that were pointing to the fact that this girl was just not who she said she was. She was deceiving me. She was lying. But I could definitely use this as an opportunity to have her keep paying my rent. So I just chose to ignore it. I'm like, fuck it. She's just going to start paying more rent because she makes way more money than I do, even more than I thought she made initially. And I'm just like, we'll just kind of like live together, I guess, until I figure something out. But we refused to split our separate ways. So I made her pay more rent. And then I found out that my cousin was actually her driver for private parties, which was strange because my cousin was somebody I grew up with. I looked up to him a lot as like a older brother. And I found out he actually owned a limousine service for strippers, right? So he would drive strippers around from party to party, because they do like private parties at people's houses and stuff. So he was her driver. So, that was another nail in the coffin for me. But the last nail in the coffin was when I found out she slept with my best friend. And I thought, you know what, that's enough. I felt betrayal on a whole nother level. The only person outside of my girlfriend at the time, which was her, was this other guy who I considered to be very, very close, who I considered to be family, and who I trusted, innately. I actually drove all the way down to Ohio from Michigan when it was negative 15 degrees outside and the roads were full of black ice, using my grandfather's truck at the time. I called him, he was in Florida. I'm like, hey, I need to use your truck. You'll pick somebody up from Ohio in the middle of the night. And it's fucking freezing outside. And still after that instance happened, something like a betrayal took place where he slept with my girlfriend. So it was a very strange time. And it was like, I was experiencing like multiple betrayals, on multiple fronts. And this made me realize a very important concept, which was like, there can be such things as toxic relationships in your life. You can be experiencing a toxic relationship and it can be hard to get out of them. As you've seen in my story, I kept going back. I kept going back to my source of pain, which was this woman who kept, for some reason, deciding to betray me. What I found out over the years was there was a name for this. It was called trauma bonding. And essentially what trauma bonding is when two people bond over a trauma, right? Like for me, it was my first love, okay? And it was my sense of self-worth because she accepted me although I was poor, So being with this person, I experienced my first love, but I also feel like somebody accepted me. So I felt more worthy in my life, I didn't feel like a poor kid who nobody cared about. I was loved by a beautiful woman. And she didn't care if I was poor. So I was living under that guise. Even though she kept hurting me, I kept thinking to myself, well, it gives me a sense of self-worth, It makes me feel good about myself and love myself that somebody else loves me. And so I kept putting myself into those same positions to getting hurt. I was trauma bonding. And for her, it was sexual attention to her was love, right? Because she didn't grow up with a father figure, hence daddy issues. So she was seeking love and validation through sexual means because when you're sexually involved with a woman, you're very attentive to her presence, right? You're very absorbed in her presence. And when you experience a loss like a father figure in your life, that's tend to be what happened inside of women is like they try to compensate for that by the sexual attention they seek later in life because it gives them that love and attention that they craved from their father themselves. So we were trauma bonding. Her, it was for sexual attention because that's how she experienced love. And for me, it was like self-worth. So we were both dealing with our own trauma bonding issues. And there's an element to the human irrationality that I think speaks to this very largely because you're probably wondering why does this even happen in the first place? Why do people trauma bond in the first place? Well, it's because we have animalistic tendencies that go in one of two directions. We either go towards pleasure or we go to avoid pain, right? Pleasure or the avoidance of pain. In my situation, it was avoidance, right? I was avoiding dealing with the issue, right, and confronting it because I didn't want to deal with the feelings of loneliness and lack of self-worth again. So I was avoiding something. So I was actually trauma bonding. I wasn't with somebody because we shared values, which I'm going to talk about in a second here. I was with somebody instead because I was avoiding the feelings of loneliness and the feelings of lack of self-worth. When you build a relationship on the foundations of either pleasure or the avoidance of pain, you create a toxic relationship. That is the conditions necessary for a toxic relationship to conspire on a very basic level. Because for pleasure is like, you want to be with a girl because she's hot. Like you want to have sex with her, right? That's pleasure. You're going towards pleasure. I'm going to be in a relationship with a girl because she's good looking and I want to have sex with her. That is not the type of person that you should strive to be with because you want them for a superficial reason. And love, if it's experienced only through physical means like that, will deteriorate over time, Okay, so you're going towards pleasure. You're creating a trauma bonded relationship because when that person loses their looks, because they will inevitably in life at some point, then you will start to lose your feelings and it will cause all kinds of toxic tendencies in your relationship. Another way you can form the foundation of a toxic relationship is, like I said, the avoidance of pain. So, you often see this in abusive relationships. Like when someone is very, very abusive to another person and you wonder, why isn't that person leaving the relationship? It's because they're scared to be alone. So it's the avoidance of pain. It's the avoidance of being alone. They rather be with somebody that's abusing them, okay, than to experience the pain of being alone. So now that we understand, like, look, this is a toxic relationship. That's what I was experiencing. It was just cycles of the same behavior. I kept getting drawn back to the thing that was poisoning me, that was damaging me. And this is very important for you to understand, because if you form a relationship off of these toxic means, you're going to wonder why, you feel like you're around somebody who's abusing you all the time. You wonder why you feel lonely, or you wonder why you lack self-confidence, because that person keeps putting you down or putting you in positions to where you feel betrayed. So if you're in a toxic relationship, it's because you made your relationship based on the wrong principles. So instead, what you want to do is you want to create a relationship based on values, and this is called value bonding. So for instance, you want to create a relationship on something like this. Like for instance, I wanted a relationship based on a healthy lifestyle. I wanted somebody who wanted to actively participate in their health, somebody who wasn't an avid smoker and drinker, somebody who liked to eat healthy foods, that didn't want to just go out to eat all the time to socialize. So to me, that was very important. That was a value system that I had in place, right? So I want to form a relationship based on that as the principle, because I know that won't change for me, right? And if it does, then I'm in a toxic relationship because the things that were previously important to me start to diminish. So you want to form a relationship based on your values. So you need to figure out what those are. So here's what I recommend in order for you to learn to value bond instead of trauma bond. Number one, you need to make a list first of the things that you absolutely hate. If you're going to get into a relationship with somebody, you need to know the things that you despise, because the things you hate compound over time. And the things that you like, they end up diminishing over time. Okay, so you want to make sure you make a list of all the things you cannot stand in a person. Like, I can't stand that someone's a smoker or a drinker. That would not be okay with me. I would never date somebody that was like that. So you want to make a list of the things that you hate. So when you go into interactions with people, you know who you want to get involved with and who you don't. Another thing is you want to make a list of what's important to you. Okay, these are your values. Because if you don't share values, well, then what's the relationship based on? It's probably based on superficial needs, maybe physical attraction, which will deteriorate over time if that's the only thing the relationship relies on. So find the things that are important to you, right? Write down a list of your values and also the things that you hate. This is actually how I met my wife of 3 years. I'm with somebody I love now is because I was able to identify early on the things that I hated and also the things that were important to me, my value system. Because when you can learn to define your values, you essentially define the person that's right for you. So be sure if you're going to ever get involved with somebody, right? Or if you're involved with somebody right now, that you learn to build a strong sense of your values and also identify the things that you hate. Because if not, you may get stuck in a toxic relationship.